Look at any food label in your kitchen. There's a number on it. 190 calories, say, printed in a small box next to grams of fat and carbohydrate. It looks like a measurement, precise, regulated, oddly specific to that exact food and portion size. That number was never measured from your food. Not this bar, not today, not any single item you've ever eaten. It was calculated from a formula built in the 1890s using a machine that has nothing to do with your body. Here's what almost nobody knows. A calorie was never a food thing to begin with. It's a unit of heat. Literally, the heat needed to raise 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree. Somebody had to get that number from your granola bar onto the label. In that process, there are at least three places where the number and your actual body stop agreeing. Three places: what your body spends digesting food, what it never absorbs at all, and how much your own gut changes the outcome. Here's where the number starts: a machine called a bomb calorimeter. Picture a small sealed steel chamber. You put a weighed piece of food inside. You fill the chamber with pure oxygen. Then you ignite the food with an electric spark. It burns completely, not digests, burns, down to ash in seconds. That chamber sits inside a bucket of water. As the food burns, the heat spreads into the water, and the water's temperature rises by a measurable amount. Measure that temperature rise carefully, and you know exactly how much heat that specific food released. That's a calorie. Define that plainly. A unit of heat measured by burning food to nothing in a steel box. On its own, that's a clean, satisfying idea. Earn the food, measure the heat, write the number. Except your body doesn't have a bomb calorimeter. Your body has never burned a single bite of food down to ash, and it never will. So how does a calorie count end up on a cereal box? A chemist named Wilbur Atwater answered that in the 1890s at what's now Wesleyan University. He worked through the USDA's newly formed Office of Experiment Stations, burning hundreds of foods in a calorimeter: pure protein, pure fat, pure carbohydrate. He got precise numbers for each. Fat released about 9.5 calories per gram, protein about 5.5, carbohydrate just over 4. Those three numbers were never really in question. What Atwater did next is where the real complexity begins. But Atwater didn't stop at burning food in a box. He also built a second, much larger chamber, one a person could sit inside. He measured real people digesting real meals: what they ate, what came out, how much heat their bodies gave off. Comparing the two machines, he noticed something the bomb calorimeter alone could never show him. When protein burns completely in a steel chamber, it releases all its energy. When it burns inside a human body, it doesn't. Some leaves as urea in your urine, still carrying unused energy with it. So Atwater subtracted for that, and for a rough average amount that isn't digested at all. What came out the other side were the general Atwater factors: 4 calories per gram of protein, 4 for carbohydrate, 9 for fat. Those numbers from research on a limited set of 19th century American foods and volunteers are still the backbone of the label on nearly every packaged food you buy today. Every packaged food's calorie count is built by multiplying protein, fat, and carbohydrate grams by those same three numbers, regardless of what the food is. Here's the first place the number and your body diverge. Digesting food costs energy. You don't get all the calories a food contains. You spend some just processing the food itself. That's called the thermic effect of food, and it isn't the same for every macronutrient. Digesting protein costs roughly 20 to 30% of its own calories. Breaking down its bonds and handling the nitrogen it contains takes real metabolic work. Carbohydrate costs about 5 to 10%. Fat costs under 5%. Fat needs very little processing to be absorbed. None of that shows up on the label. 100 calories of protein and 100 calories of fat are not the same 100 calories, not once your body pays the processing cost on each. Here's the second place. Not everything on the label even reaches your bloodstream. Researchers at the USDA, led by scientist David Baer, tested this directly with whole almonds. The Atwater formula predicts a certain fixed number of calories for a standard serving. Baer's team fed people measured amounts of whole almonds under controlled conditions, then measured everything that came out the other end, including the fat still in participants' stool. A meaningful share of the fat inside a whole almond was never absorbed at all. It stayed locked inside intact plant cell walls, a rigid fiber structure that made it through the digestive tract still sealed shut. Chew the same almonds into a fine paste first, or eat almond butter instead, and more of that trapped fat gets absorbed, because the cell walls are already broken open. The printed label number doesn't change one bit between the whole nut and the butter. What your body actually receives does, based partly on how thoroughly you happen to chew. Here's the third place. Two people can eat the identical meal and extract different amounts of energy from it. Gut transit time differs between people. Food moving faster or slower changes how much gets absorbed. The specific mix of bacteria living in your large intestine differs from person to person too. Some of those bacteria ferment fiber your own cells can't digest and convert it into short chain fatty acid molecules your own body can absorb and use as fuel. That mechanism itself is well established. How much energy it adds up to per person is not. It's a real, currently active area of research, not a fixed, settled number. None of these three places are visible anywhere on a label built from 19th century averages. This explains a few things you've probably run into. Why eating a precise number of calories never lines up with the scale, even tracking carefully. The label was never a precise personal measurement of what your own body specifically absorbs. So exact tracking of an imprecise number still produces an imprecise result down the line. Why whole nuts tend to come in lower in real feeding studies than their label predicts, while the same nuts ground into butter track much closer to it. Why two people on paper identical diets can see different results without either doing anything wrong. Why a protein heavy diet leaves people spending more energy just digesting it, a real physical cost. None of these effects are large enough to ignore the label entirely. They're large enough that treating it as exact was always the actual mistake. It's a genuinely useful standardized estimate, just one with structured direction known error. Tracking tends to work best as a way to read your own trend over time, against a consistent yardstick rather than as a claim about exactly what one meal delivered. Here's what's settled and what isn't. The history is settled. Atwater's numbers, the digestion cost, the almond findings, all measured and replicated. What's still genuinely open is exactly how far this margin of error extends. Nobody has rerun Atwater's full approach on most of what's sold in a grocery store today. Whether other whole foods hide the same kind of trapped, unabsorbed energy is only partly mapped, and exactly how much your own gut microbiome shifts your numbers is still active research. The direction of the error is well understood. The exact size of it mostly isn't yet. So when a number claims precision to a single calorie, that precision is mostly borrowed from the formula. So the next time you read a calorie number off a package, it isn't fiction. And it isn't a lie. It's a 130-year-old formula, run once, applied to your food after the fact, not a fresh measurement of what's actually sitting in your hand right now. This has been an explanation of the physiology and history behind food energy numbers, not medical or nutrition advice. Individual digestion varies, and none of this replaces guidance from a qualified professional.